Every language we speak has this kind of hidden blueprint, right? A secret structure that shapes everything about it. Today, we're going to be linguistic architects and explore two totally different designs, the blueprints for English and for Spanish. So think about language less like a list of words and more like a massive, complex building. It's got its own unique architecture. And what we're about to do is deconstruct two of the world's most impressive linguistic structures, layer by fascinating layer, starting right from the foundation. All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by looking at how we even approach comparing languages. Then we'll lay out the architectural framework we'll be using. From there, we'll start with the smallest pieces, the sounds, then move up through grammar, into the tricky world of meaning, and finally, we'll see how this whole blueprint thing is actually useful in the real world. Okay, first up, a tale of two languages. And this isn't just about making a list of what's different. It's really about a big shift in how we even analyze them in the first place. This right here highlights a major paradigm shift. See, back in the 60s, there was this thing called contrastive analysis, and its goal was pretty simple, but honestly a little flawed. It tried to predict the errors a student would make based on how their first language might interfere. It was just too simplistic. The modern approach, what we call contrastive linguistics, is so much more powerful. The goal isn't just to guess at errors, but to deeply and rigorously describe the structural differences between languages. This gives us a much more solid foundation for everything from teaching to translation. Now let's get to our core framework for today, the architecture of language. We're going to be doing what's called a micro to macro structural analysis. And this diagram? This is our map. We're going to start right there in the middle, at the phonological level. That's the individual sounds. And then we're going to zoom out, level by level. We'll go through how words are formed, then how sentences are built, then meaning, and finally, all the way out to the biggest layer, social context. And that brings us to our very first level of contrast, the phonological divide. I mean, this is the absolute bedrock of a language, its unique inventory of sounds. So in English, we're working with a pretty big inventory of about 12 distinct vowel sounds, or phonemes. Think about the difference between the a in cat versus the a in father. Those are two different sounds. Now, compare that with Spanish. It's got this beautifully clean, simple set of just 5 vowel phonemes. A, e, I, o, u. That's the whole shebang. And this huge difference in number, it has massive consequences. Here's a classic example of one of those consequences. For a native Spanish speaker, the two very distinct English vowels you hear in sheep and ship can sound practically identical. Their brain, without even thinking, just maps both of those sounds onto their one single native sound. It's not a hearing problem at all. It's a blueprint problem. The mental boxes for those two separate sounds just don't exist in their native language's architecture. And it's not just about the inventory of sounds either. It's also about the rules for how you combine them, what linguists call phonotactics. So Spanish rules, for example, don't allow you to start a word with an S sound followed by another consonant. So what happens? A native speaker will naturally fix a word like special by popping a vowel on the front, especial. They're just applying their native blueprint to a foreign word. It's fascinating. Okay, let's zoom out one level to what we can call grammar's engine. Here, we're looking at morphology and syntax, basically how words get built and how sentences get put together. And this is one of the most dramatic differences you'll find. English verbs are pretty simple. They have very few changes. You've got maybe 4 or 5 forms, right? Work, works, worked, working. Our grammar is more analytic. We rely on extra words to get complex meanings across. But Spanish? Whoa. It is morphologically rich. A single Spanish verb can have over 45 different forms, and every single one is packed with information. Who did it, when they did it, even their attitude about it. And that incredibly powerful morphological engine has a direct effect on sentence structure. Because a Spanish verb like llegaron already tells you that they arrived, you don't even need the pronoun. This is called prodrop. This richness also means you can be way more flexible with word order. English, on the other hand, with its simpler verbs, is pretty much locked into a strict subject-verb-object order to avoid confusion. You just can't say saw John the movie. Our blueprint completely forbids it. All right, moving outward again, we land on what I like to call the illusion of translation. This is the lexicosemantic level, where we get into how words connect to meaning and really to culture itself. So let me just ask you a seemingly simple question. Is the English word cat the same thing as the Spanish word gato? I mean, it seems obvious, right? But the answer is actually way more complex than you'd think. The thing is, words are not perfect little containers that hold one meaning. They're more like pointers to a whole web of concepts. So yeah, cat and gato both point to that furry feline animal. But gato also points to something totally different, like a car jack. This gets at a really crucial point. You don't just translate words, you have to translate the specific sense of a word. And even then, those senses are loaded with cultural stuff that almost never lines up perfectly. So, why does all this matter? Well, in our last section, we get to see the real power of contrast and how this whole blueprint idea becomes an incredibly powerful diagnostic tool. Let's take a look at this real-world example from a news headline. Buddy Valastro se lastimó su mano. Now, that translates literally to Buddy Valastro hurt himself, his hand. To a native Spanish speaker, something about that sounds just off. But why? And here's where we see all the levels interacting. This one little error is happening on two layers at the same time. First, on the lexicosemantic level, in English, we think of body parts as things we possess. It's his hand. But in Spanish, they're seen as just inherent parts of a person. And second, on the morphosyntactic level, that little reflexive pronoun, se, already implies whose hand it is. So adding su, or his, is totally redundant. It is a classic case of the English blueprint being sort of forced onto a Spanish structure where it just doesn't fit. So the takeaway here is that this contrastive approach is just immensely useful. For language teachers, it lets them pinpoint the exact spots where students will struggle and tailor their lessons. For professional translators, it's absolutely essential for navigating those deep cultural and meaning gaps we talked about. And honestly, for all of us, it builds something called metalinguistic awareness. It basically uses another language as a mirror to show us the hidden, invisible architectural rules of our own language. You see, understanding these blueprints doesn't just make you a better language learner or a better translator, it makes you a more conscious user of your own language. By seeing the architectural choices another language makes, you start to see the choices your language has already made for you. This material has been curated and customized by Luis Peralta, drawing from the foundational work of J. Valenzuela Manzanares. And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. What invisible rules are shaping the way you think right now?